Okay, good morning. So we decided to, first I was thinking we're not going to do a shiur on Reish Ayin Beis because we didn't really learn the sugyas, but I thought could I first Shleim said to see it, and after working it through a little bit, I thought it's at least have a short shiur to talk through some main nakudas of the Mishnah Berurah, the Bir Halacha, and today's poskim on some shalos here, which ran together Meiser for a lot of types of wine and things. So I thought could I to go through it and really speak through some main points. So in the beginning of Reish Ayin Beis, or as Joey just pointed out, Ayin Reish Beis, which stands for Arev, which is sweet, because we want to switch the Siman Klala to a Siman Bracha. So in the Kachim al Yayin Sherecha Ra Afagav Sherecha Time Lachamra, even though the smell and the taste is that of wine, still if it's a bad smell, then you shouldn't use it. Well, al Yayin Megula, also not Megula if it was overnight. Megula, there's a shaila how long it has to be Megula to be Megula. I don't go into so much over here. Even today that we're not makbid on Gilui because there's no snakes today. The ikar reason for Gilui is brought down in the Gemara was because snakes take a drink of it. There might be poison floating around there, even though we don't have snakes. But still, it's not considered yain mechubed to be if it's sat for a long time open. So sometimes it happens that you have you forget the bottle of wine on the or grape juice on the counter. You forget to put the cover on it overnight. So you get up and you realize, oh, yeah, I didn't cover the wine last night or the grape juice. So that should not be used for kiddush anymore. So even though you probably don't have snakes in your house, but still it's not considered, it's no longer mechubed to use that wine. So you shouldn't use wine if it tastes or smells like vinegar. So we'll go into the details of that. Just to speak out of Finakudas, the Mishnah Berurah brings Shem the Ramban if it's recha ra, that it's possible to feel a b'diavad. It's a psul b'diavad. So the psul, according to the Ramban, of the psul of this is the Gemara says hakriveu nala pachasecha, which translates something like, please be makriv this carbon to your garbage can, something like that. Like don't bring it to me. So that psul, the Ramban holds is ma'akev. So the Bir Halacha has a bigger riches about that. That if this time of hakriveh and all the pachasecha, there are plenty of places in Shas we see that it's only a din l'chatchila, but yeah, but it's kosher, and because there's a din the mivchar nidarecha. You should use the choice of your nidarim. You should bring a choice korban, a better level korban. We know that from many places that's only din l'chatchila. So l'chor, you should have said the same thing with Gabi Kiddush. It should only be din l'chatchila. However, he says, on the other hand, we find that the Rambam says a Kiddush that the psul of treifa for our korban is also from the Rambam says hakriveh nala pachasecha. We know for sure that without a doubt that a treifa for a korban is pasul legamri. It's not just a din l'chatchila. Even b'diavad, it's not kosher if it's a treifa. And the Rambam says that's when you do hakriveh nala pachasecha. So you see that there are times that hakriveh nala pachasecha and shas is l'chatchila, and there are times that it's also b'diavad, even it's possibly even b'diavad. So why the Ramban shows over here that it should be the latter, it should be possible b'diavad, is not sure. He remains with Sarachiyun, but sof kol sof, the Ramban does say that, so he quotes that in Mishnah Berurah. Doesn't not Cholakan obviously, but he just a ha'ara on the Ramban that how does he know over here it's possible b'diavad? I mean, you can understand that if it's really that bad of wine, then it's like it doesn't. The whole point of the yayin is that it's shebeach and it's a shevach to the kiddush, and if it's a bad wine, there's no shevach going on over here. Now the Mishnah Berurah brings Hashem the Kiveger in the Bir Halacha that since over here we say that the psul over here of yain lavan, according to the man Amr that passes yain lavan, we have a machlokas over here that white wine is pasul or not. So the Shulchan Aruch says that is pasul was only going to be for kiddush and not for havdalah, because since by kiddush we're not going to have dafka wine and not to use chemer bedina, so even though yain lavan might be chemer bedina, but we pasul it for that, but we don't pasul it for havdalah, because havdalah it's kosher to have chemer bedina. So the Kiveger says that since we're being machshir, there's a psul yain lovin for kiddush, and it's kosher for Havdalah. Who did everything else in this sif, like Reish Ayin and everything else should be kosher for Havdalah, because we're distinguishing between kiddush and Havdalah in this simon. That's from Kiveger, and the Bir Halacha has a pella on him that how can you compare the two things? The reason that yain lovin is not good for kiddush is because the shitas that hold that the definition of yain, it has to be dafka adam, it has to be red. Like the pasuk the Gemara brings that you should use red wine because it says al tera, so yain kiyas adem. Don't see the wine because it's red. So the Gemara says that the definition, part of the definition of wine is red. According to some shitas, that's ma'akev. So you understand that's ma'akev for kiddush because you need yain. But shenkin Havdalah, you don't need dafka wine. You can use chemer medina. So white wine is no logara than beer or anything else that would be chemer medina. So that's why it's okay for Havdalah. Mashenkin, something which is recha raw, that's possible not because it's something about the wine. It's just that it's hakaven al pachasecha. It's a psul, a different psul. So I'd comment that it's not mechubadik for kiddush. It's also not mechubadik and possible for Havdalah. So he disagrees with the Kveger's across the board hechsher for anything in the simon that's possible for kiddush should be kosher for Havdalah. Okay. Now there was another Bir Halacha over here that this halacha of yain sherecha ra, it has a bad smell. So Bir Halacha says, Pashtus, you would say that's only if it's masriach machmas atzmo, something like it in itself spoiled or went bad, turned to vinegar. But if it only picked up something from the barrel, like a bad smell from the barrel, that should be okay. But he has a back and forth about that. But the halacha l'maisa in Bir Halacha he remains the tzarachian about that. But in Mishnah Berurah he's machriya l'chumra. We said really throughout the whole simon he takes on l'chumra as never pushes that even if it picked up the reach of something else extraneous, like it sat in the barrel and the barrel gave it a bad smell, there's something wrong with the barrel. So he takes on that is a psul as well. It doesn't have to be machmas atzmo. Okay. Okay, Megula, Mishnah Berurah explains, is also the reason for Megula. We obviously don't have snakes today, so we're not. It's ikr, then it's not a problem. So why are we being machmer over here by Megula? So he says that's also it's included in the category of hakaven el pachasecha, which means something that's an inferior quality thing should not be used for yain. It's supposed to be something choice, something good to bring it covered. But if it's begetter hakaven el pachasecha, sat out open all night, then that's an issue. The last point over here in this sif is, but if it has the taste of chometz, vinegar, so we have a chiddush over here that we go basar taima, even though it tastes like, even though it smells like wine or it looks like wine, we know it's wine, but the taste is vinegar, then we go after the taste, and that for sure is a psul. We find tamki ikr by many yisurim, so certainly over here inside the giving it the category of hakaven el pechasecha, to make it into an inferior thing. If it tastes like vinegar, then we go bust to the time of that. It's more than just. I think here it seems like it's even more than that. It might be more than just hakaven el pechasecha. Here, if it tastes like vinegar, then I would say that it's if you go basar taima, then it's no longer wine. It's something else. Vinegar is not wine. There's no like shasat chak heter to make kiddush on vinegar. It's not wine anymore. It lost its status of wine completely. So that's a pashtus over here also. Once it tastes like vinegar, then it lost its status.
So everything in the sif is even b'diavad.
But that seems to when it's hakaven el pechasecha, then that's the back and forth in the Bir Halacha. But the Maisa, he brought the Ramban the halacha in the beginning that he brings right away in Sifkat Nalef. He says, Afilu ein lo yain acher, v'afilu b'diavad im kiddush mashma medibur Ramban shuva beis Yosef lo yatsa. So I'm Bir Halacha that he has a question about that, but the Maisa, that's what the Ramban says. So that's what his pasuk over here.
Once he brings that legave, the first case of the smell, so that's going to be the same for anything that he's applying hakrivna.
That's what it would seem to be. So, like in that case, it would be better to, if it's Friday night, that's all you have, it's better to make kiddush on pas. not to do that, not to use it. And during the day, if that's all you have, so then better to use Chemer Medina, but not to use this. And then the Chiddush will be better. That'll be the case. Bain b'Kiddush, Bain b'Havdalah. Havdalah also you shouldn't use it. So again, better to use Chemer Medina. Better to do it on orange juice if it's not reconstituted, real orange juice. Or we're not going to go into Chilchos Chemer Medina. That's all. So again, it's on right. That's its own simon. Okay, Sif Beis Yain Megito Katzun Love. So Yain Megito is within the first few days of its process. Even the Mishnah Berurah says mitzvah min muchar. It's better to have Yain Yashan, which is at least 40 days. This is within the first few days. It's Yain Megito. The Sochet Adam Eshkol Shal Anavim Omer Lo Kiddush Hayom. You can squeeze out. The Gemara says you can squeeze out a clump of grapes into your cup, and then immediately make kiddush on it. So we see two chiddushim from that. The Gemara, the Mishnah Berurah points out as well that one chiddush of the Gemara is that you see that grape juice, it's not wine at all, right? It's straight off the grapes. It's pure grape juice. That's you can use that for a kiddush. Number one, and number two, you see also that you can make kiddush during the day because obviously you're squeezing the grapes during the day and then you immediately make kiddush. So you see, you make kiddush mibod yom, which is really the last thing we spoke about. So and Nakuda here that so again, so the Mishnah Berurah says that it's mitzvah and move harbi yain yashan, and I'll just tell you a ma'aseh I had with the Shlomo Zalman that, and maybe we'll try to explain that ma'aseh, but I was talking to him once about Daled Kosos. I might have mentioned this to you guys once, I don't remember, but Ramosha has a tshuva, as we know, that for Daled Kosos, he says you can use grape juice, but you should at least a third wine. Ramosha writes because the Gemara says that has to be derech cheres, and so derech cheres means like you feel the cheres. You have to have a little bit of wine there to be considered to feel like it's derech cheres. That's Ramosha. So I spoke to Shlomo Zalman about it, and I learned my lesson way before that not to quote somebody against him, not to quote it, tell him Ramosha says it, and then he'll get angry and like, so what do you need me for? But but I asked him, can you use grape juice for Daled Kosos? He said, sure, why not? I said, it doesn't need to be derech cheres. It doesn't need to be, partly wine of derech cheres. So his answer to me was, and he said it very emphatically with a finger, he said, Zeyayin, 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 Zeyayin. I think 4 times. So I said, does that mean the Rosh Yeshiva holds that it's wine? I just kidding, I didn't say that. Now this is even, he said this even about Daled Kosos, where there you have other svoras besides just regular shiloh, whether it's wine or not. You have a possibility of it being derech cheres, and most of the Gemara derech cheres. Even over there, he's al-tchila. So the shiloh is why. Like here, the Mishnah Berurah does say mitzvah min and muvchar b'yayin yashan. So it's hard for me to say, in a discussion like that, if you really meant to be holding on the Mishnah Berurah, but it sounded like he didn't have any compunction at all. Even for Daled Kosos, I would say kol sheken for kiddush. That that's what you want. That's what you can use. So it's certainly not like that Igros Moshe. So the Shalit is what this for would be. I think possibly he was going to Shitaso, and Rav Shlomo Zalman has a long tshuva in Michal Shlomo. It's in Chelik Aleph, the first Chelik of Michal Shlomo. I believe it's Siman Daled. That he holds that the reason that grape juice is kosher for kiddush. Right, so over there, he has all arichos about grape juice. We'll speak more about it when we get a little further about yain simukim. So, but here, just for this point, so he holds that the reason that grape juice is kosher is because when you first squeeze the grape juice, it's royally os yain. B'shas, it is made as grape juice. If you would let it sit at that point, it'll turn into wine. Something that's royally os yain already has a din yain to begin with, as the yain din yain mitchilaso. So even though afterwards you might cook it, and we'll speak about that also afterwards, it's no longer roy, but since it's you're not mishana, it's bracha. Even though, let's say if you pasteurize it, we'll speak about that also. But if you cook it, let's say you turn it to muvushal, grape juice muvushal, once it's muvushal, you stop the process in its tracks. It cannot turn into wine at that point. You've killed whatever yeast or whatever's in there that would turn into grape juice. Even so, shas that it first became grape juice, it was roy to become wine. So when you cooked it, so it had a full shame yain because it's royally of yain. It brought rise to that. So once that was the case, it has a shame yain, and the bracha of it is beper gafen. When you cook it, since it's not nishtana the greusa, that's a klal in hilchos brachos. If you have a certain bracha on something, and then it becomes mevushal in a way that it's not nishtana the reusa, doesn't become any worse through the cooking, then it retains its bracha. So the tam, as long as the tam wasn't nifgam or whatever through the cooking, and it became something else, so then it remains fully what it was. So if that's the case, if it's full, has a full shame yain to it, means chilaso, and that's why it was beper gafen, and that never changed even through the cooking or whatever. So Mamela, I could see how he wouldn't hold there's any reason to prefer real wine over this wine because it has a din wine as well. So that's why he was very emphatic that it's yain. So that's a point from Rosh Hashanah. We went to Sif Gimel. Mekadshen al yain should be fiachavis al pi sheyeshbo kamachim. You can have it has little specks of flour on it that's still kosher. Yesh osim l'kadosh love is standard tchila haver kamachim. Others say you can't do it. The says Ramal, you have to first sift out the kamach. V'alyain shebeshuli achabis al pi shesh b'shmorim al yain shachor v'alyain mosuk v'alyain derecho chalav v'tamid chamro. And also, if it has a taste of, it's wine that has a taste of wine, it just has a smell of vinegar. All these things are kosher. Mitzvah liver yain tov l'kadosh. It's still a mitzvah to get a better quality wine. All these are b'diavad kosher, but it's better to have a good quality wine. Now, this in over here that if it's yain masuk, so the Biur Halacha has a tmiya that if it's masuk ma'oid, it's very sweet, and it gets that way because Derek's trying to get in. Okay. They should set these things up that if somebody comes in, there should be like a ping or something like that to let you know someone's trying to get in, or like a doorbell or something, like some way to know. You talk and talk. I don't know how long Derek is sitting there. Hope not too long. So the Biur Halacha has a tmiya over here on this yain masuk. If it's masuk ma'oid, then it's pasal legamrei for menachos, to be nesachim for korbanos. So because if it's very masuk ma'od, like I guess things are different today than they were then. Today masuk ma'od would be considered a mila probably, but bezman chazal, bezman the Torah. So masuk ma'od, very sweet, would be considered it's considered a mos. I guess the way wine is supposed to be a certain way, and if it's too sweet, then it's not wine. So he wanted to say the Biur Halacha that possibly it's, even though it's masuk ma'od, if it's not nishtana the greusa, that's just the way it was with tchilas brioso. From the time the wine became wine, that's what it was. Perhaps that's not a problem. Maybe that's why it's not a psul. But he's docha that in Biur Halacha because if that be the case, then why does the Gemara have to bring a raya that yain kushi is kosher for kiddush because it's kosher lemenachos? Why do you have to come out to kosher lemenachos? Just say that there's a klal that if it's not nishtana the greusa from what it was, it remains kosher. So he remains with tzorach iyun on that. But it's just interesting that today I think yain masuk is considered a big mila, and bisman for kabbanos and everything is considered a psul. It's considered a mius to have wine that's too sweet. Okay, moving on. Just again, we just want to speak out small points on all these sifim over here. And sif daled mekadshin al yain lavan ramban posla l'kiddush afila b'diavad. So have a huge machloks l'katza l'katza. Either it's kosher, it's fine, or it's possibly even b'diavad. Av mabdil and love, for sure you can be mabdil, like we said before. That the chiluk between kiddush and abdallah is that kiddush you need yain. According to the Ramban, the definition of wine is red, If not that, if it's not red, then it's missing in the shame yain. And but even so, that's still fine for Havdalah, because even according to Ramban, because all you need is Chemer Medina for Havdalah. And then Shulchan Aruch ends off, and Minhag Olam K'Sor Rishona, we know we do use white wine at times when that's a better wine. Like Mishra says, if that's the better wine you can get, right? It's the red wine that you have is inferior to that, then better to use according to what the Shulchan Aruch Pasan is better to use the white wine. Now, just one ha'ara on this is what a lot of people do to be Yotzei Kol Hadeus is to if you have some white wine and you want to use that white wine, but you want to make it red, so you pour a little red wine into it, and then it becomes red. So that Rosh Hashanah said doesn't help. He said that you can't, if it's not wine, if it's white wine means it's yayin adam mitivoy, but it's chilaso. It's to make it red, put food coloring, or putting other wine is tantamount to putting food coloring to the white wine. It doesn't change it to become wine if it wasn't wine before. So you're not helping anything by putting in some red wine into it. If anything, for carrot, if you do it on Shabbos, then it becomes a shiloh. We say in Sfiya Ba'ochlin, but if the purpose is to change the color, so then there are poskim that hold it midrabanan yesh Sfiya Ba'ochlin. Like if you just put two foods together and changes the color of that, then everyone agrees that's not a problem. Which we say in Sfiya Ba'ochlin. But if you're coming to color it, trying to change the color, you do that on Shabbos, that might be a problem in Shabbos. And you're not gaining anything either, according to Rosh Hashanah.
Could you be mevatel according to Shlomo Zalman? Like, could I put like a rove of red wine and like put like a minority of the white wine?
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Even though I need both in order to make like the shiur?
Yeah, that's not a problem. Especially, I think even those that are machmir by tzia v'ochlin, you would have to put the seva into the ochel, not the other way. So if you put the red and then you pour white into it, I think it's not a problem. The kulam is not an issue. Okay, so moving along here. That's important. You see that I want to put that out because you see that often. People try to fix it by putting red wine. Shlomo Zalman said doesn't help. Okay, and then Sifhei. I don't know if it's big Kiddush on Sifhei. See here, Yain Chai, a few of them Chazak Dari Al Chad plus Maya Mekatzmalav and Kamakom Yosef Tov the Mozgoy Vavachie Mazuk Karoy. It's better to be Mozigat than not Mozigat. The Ramah says Yena Shalanu Yosef Tov in below Maziga. We should not. It's better not to add any Maziga, any water to our wine. Our wines. I'm not sure what changed. Historically, I'm not sure when and what changed. That their wines were made in a way that they were so thick that you had to have 3 parts water to the wine. I'm not sure what exactly changed it today. It was fully wine. It wasn't like they they made some kind of reconstituted or whatever thing. That was their wine. Their wine was, the way it came out was so thick you need to add 3 parts water to it to be normal wine. So I don't know if anybody has any insight on that. If you do, let me know, because I've wondered that for many years. What exactly happened that the wine has changed today? There's no such thing as wine yet. Not that I'm aware of, you need to add water to the way our wines are made. So I'm not sure what changed. Okay.
What's the difference between Yain Chai and the case of where he just squeezed the grapes earlier? I didn't really understand that.
Yain Chai is referring to their wine the way it was before you watered it down.
So this could be even like Yain Yashan. It could be even like 40 days old. It doesn't mean specifically like it's like brand new. It just means that it's not.
It's not watered down yet.
Yeah, watered down.
Yeah, like the Gemara in Arbeit Sachim spoke about it. If you're doing Shasan Chai, so it says the Yain Yatsi, the Cheres Lo Yatsa. It's considered wine, so you say Yain, but you're not Yatsi Cheres, because it's not yet in its Kishmaka form to be considered like. You're leaning over to feel like you're a king, and then you're drinking wine like a barbarian. Like it's not watered down. So So that's just the way their wines were, and it needed to be watered down. I never saw, you have to look it up more, look for it, to see what happened, what changed. Okay, going into Sivav. Yain Simukim Mekachimalav. So Ramah says that yain samukim, when you're taking raisins, they're either dried by heat or by the sun, right? Like the Gemara in Shabbos, grogos at smukim, shehinicham rosh gagon. That's one the classic case of muksa that Rosh Shimon is moda to. Even Rosh Shimon holds ein muksa, but moda Rosh Shimon with grogos at smukim to dacha b'yadayim. You put it up there, you're docha b'yadayim. You're not going to use it until it completely dries and turns into raisins. So that's muksa l'kuli amok. So those are the ways you have yain samukim. Now the Mishnah Berurah says over here in the name of the Bechor Shor, all the Acharnim speak about this, but in the name of the Bechor Shor that there has to be more raisins than you can't have 6 times the water over the raisins. If it's 6 times, you have, let's say it's I don't know, a gallon of raisins and you have 6 gallons of water, then you got a problem. That has to be maybe 5 gallons of water to the raisins. You can't have, because it's based on the Gemara and Avodah Zorah that yain is batal b'sheish. It's very interesting, very different klolim, and when it comes to yain than it is for other yisurim. Shar yisurim, you need batal b'shishim. Yain, you need batal b'sheish. The famous tshuva of Moshe by sherry casks that that they give Tom yain from which is yain, not kosher wine, that's in the barrels. They use sherry casks that had previous wine in it. Now you're making new wine that's kosher in it. So is that kosher or not? And so Moshe has a famous tshuva that it's okay because it's batal b'sheish. You have more. You don't have batal b'shishim, but you do have batal b'sheish. That's all you need for yain. So Rebelsky had disagreed, but Moshe, Moshe is matter. Even though the world is pretty machmer about today, but Ikar did is mutter like Moshe. So yain, because of for various reasons, has a different klolim. So that's why the Bechor Shor says that over here it can't be 6 times the water compared to the amount of grapes that are here of the tzimukim. The Mishnah Berurah brings a machlokes. How do you measure the sheish? Do you measure it by the tzimukim, by the raisins when you first put them in the water when they're still dry and raisiny, or after a while they blow up? After a while especially after the fermentation process, they sort of get reconstituted and they grow up to bigger size. So that brings a machlokes, and Mishnah Berurah says karadi machmir that you should have less than 6 against it when it's in the smaller size, because it might be less than 6 when it gets bigger, but not when it was first smaller. It should be machmir the other way when it's smaller. Okay, now one last Nakuda here, he speaks out. I'll tell you. All right. The Shiloh Maisa, which comes up with this out of this sif, which the post will speak about, is in very, very Maisa today, is what they call in Hebrew mitz anavim mishuchzar, which would be reconstituted grape juice. They take it and they sort of they boil out all the water, so for whatever reason it's easier to work with, and then they take it and they add water back into it, so now it goes back to the state that it was before it was boiled out. So that Rosh Zalman and Tshuva writes, it's in Chelik Aleph Siman Daled in the first Chelik of Minchas Shlomo, and it's also you have the Sefer Shulchan Shlomo over here on this sif. They bring the whole tshuva down. So the Rosh Zalman writes Barichos that reconstituted grape juice is shahakol. It's possible for kiddush. It lost the bracha of Rebbe Agafen, and it's shahakol. So the shahakol, because it needs to be grape juice mitchila, and not that it became grape juice. You can't make a grape juice by adding water to it. So the obvious question is, what about our sif? Over here also, you had a certain amount of grapes there were grapes to a certain size, and now they were, in a sense, the water was evaporated out of it by heat process or by the sitting in the sun. It lost its water, and now you're just putting the water back into it again. We say over here that it's kosher. So why should this be any different than reconstituted? Why shouldn't this be a riot that it's okay? So Shlomo Zalman says that the reason that it's okay over here, like the post can say, if you look carefully over here, is because after it sits for a while, then the whole thing ferments. The fermentation process, it's toses, means it's ferments. So the tsisisa, the fermentation process, that turns the water that's in it turns that into wine, because the whole thing all ferments together. There's like a cooking type of process, a natural cooking process called fermentation that turns the raisins plus water all into yayin. So that's why it works over here. Masha over there, you took out the water. Now the water that was in the grapes naturally, all fruits and vegetables have natural water in them. They're mostly water, like we're mostly water. So they're also mostly water. That water, as long as it's part of it, its natural makeup of the grape, then it's not considered water. It's considered the grape. That's what the grape is. The grape consists of a certain amount of water. But when you take that water out through evaporation, so just adding water into it when there's no new fermentation process, you're just adding water in. Mechatesi, that water has a din yayin. So it's rather than it becoming wine, it's just water mixed with grape juice. And so the water that's in there is not yayin at all. It's just you have a minimum of grape juice and you have more water. So it's just mayim ravim, he says, not anything that becomes that. And but you might also ask, what about mezigas yayin? So also their wine, the way it was made, we just said that you have to have 3 parts water to 1 part wine. So what about that water? You're just mixing into it and you're drinking it right away. So he says that since that was the derech, that was dark abakach, that was the way that wine was used at those times. The wine was undrinkable the way it was, and it's only drinkable with the water. That's the dark abakach. So then that water then, and only since wine is only wine with the water, and no other way. So then it's not wine without the water. Fakeret. Then you need that water for it to be considered wine. And that was dark abakach, and that's why that water is considered masha enken by grape juice. Normal grape juice doesn't need water to be grape juice. The fact that you took it out, you evaporated the water out of it, and now you want to add water back in, that doesn't turn it into dark abakach. That's just what you're doing. So, and it takes it a step further. Like we mentioned earlier, there's some Zalman says in this tshuva that the only reason why is grape juice kosher to begin with for yayin? It says yayin, and it's not really yayin. It says because he brings rayas that it's because it's at the time you squeezed out of the grapes, it was roy to become wine. Since it was roy lios yayin on its own, so then that's what gives it its din of yayin. But when you evaporate all the water out of it and turn it into something else that's not drinkable right now, so then since right now you destroyed it from being roy lios yayin, you changed it to a whole different state. Now, right now it's not roy lios yayin until you're going to add more water into it. When it does, it becomes drinkable again. At that point, it's not roy lios yayin. Then you took it out of the category of yayin completely. You can't take something that's not yayin and make it into yayin. You can't do that. You already took it out of the ability to become yayin, so it lost its status of being yayin completely by the change that you made in it. So you might ask on that. And if so, grape juice that's mevushal, maybe also that should be puzzle, because again, by cooking it, we said that you stop the potential fermentation process because you kill whatever natural yeasts are in there that can turn it into yayin. You destroy it through the cooking. So mamela, maybe you took it out of roy lios yayin. It should be puzzle as well. That he says you can't say. That's not true. Why? Because, like we said, at the time that it came out of the grapes, then it tasted good and it was roy lios yayin at that point. So when you cooked it, as long as it was not in the shtana the greyasa, you cooked it, and now it retained the exact same state that it was in before. It's just cooked. It was cooked, and now it's cooled down. So since it was Brei Pri HaGofen when it came out, because it's roy lios yayin, and the klal is in Hilchos Brachos that if you have something that has a certain bracha and it's not in the shtana the greyasa through what you did, it retains that bracha. So by cooking it, the cooking process is not mafkia the shem yayin. It doesn't take away the Brei Pri HaGofen from it because it was never in the shtana the greyasa. Even though you might have stopped the ability to turn into wine, but since it was roy to be wine, and for that reason it took on the Malyusa, the Gemara says in Brachos that Yain is in Stanel Malyusa, that it goes up a level from Brepia H to become Brepia Gafen. So that happened the minute it came out and became grape juice. Now it's roy to be Yain, and it was Nishtana La Malyusa, and took this new bracha Brepia Gafen. Right, when you cooked it, and it didn't change it the Greusa, mitzad its taste, in its form and its taste, it's not Nishtana Greusa, then retains the bracha Brepia Gafen. Masha'en Kain, if you evaporate the whole thing and you turn it into this undrinkable substance that you need to add water back into to make it drinkable, then it was the Nishtana Greusa, and it lost the bracha Brepia Gafen. You can't bring it back a bracha Brepia Gafen by adding water to it, because what you're adding to it is not wine, it's just water. So all you have is yayin muravim in something that was grape juice, and the whole thing is shakel.
It sounds like it has to be something that you did be a dayan in order to make it a problem, because that's how the yayin that needs meziga starts out also. It's not drinkable. And then you're doing right, and then you're doing something to make it drinkable. So it's not that it went from a status of not wine into wine that seems to have any halachic ramifications. It's rather that you did something to make it. Is that true?
I'm not sure if that's totally true, because we see, like we mentioned the Gemara before in Arbeit Sachim, that even before the meziga, it's considered yain. That's why the Gemara says in Arbeit Sachim, if you drink yain chai at the seder, yidei yain yatsa, yidei cheres lo yatsa. So you see that even before the meziga, it has a shame yain, right. And it's just not its best form. So you're not yotzei derech cheres. Mashenkin over here, the grape juice on its own doesn't have a shame yain. It's only because it's royally yos yain. So on its own, it doesn't really have a shame yain. So if you destroy its royally yos yain, not beside just the cooking, beside its whole form was changed, so then it totally lost its shaychus to yain. That's what Shlomo Zalman is saying.
Uh-huh.
So excuse me. So this then becomes a problem to also, Shlomo Zalman speaks over there, to add water to grape juice, even if you don't, reconstituted we see is totally not yain. But let's say you take grape juice and you add water to it. You didn't change the grape juice, you just added some water to it. So if you add too much water to it, so grape juice already, Shlomo Zalman says, is a tam chalash. It's considered a weaker form of wine. It's already a tam chalash, a weakened taste, weakened form. So if you add water to it, then you can weaken it even further. So that becomes a problem. To add water to grape juice. To add a couple drops, a tiny little bit, it's one thing, but to add any significant amount, that becomes a problem. It's brought down to Shulchan Shlem over here that Shlomo Zalman, the mashmos over there is that you shouldn't add any water at all. He says only this is what the derech is. Some people have an Indian of by Abdullah or by Kiddush to add a few drops, because Mesika, Smicha, Adin, there's Inyan Kabbalah, add a few drops in there. So that that's not an issue. But more than that, it starts becoming a question of how much you can add in. I once had a Maisa, I was in a shul, Eretz Yisrael, many years ago, and there was a sign up in the shul that said, in the name of, it was like one of these warnings, in the name of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that even adding a drop of water into grape juice makes it, it turns it into shakel. So never added even a drop of water into grape juice. That's what it said there. So I saw him recently, shortly thereafter, I saw him, I was with him. And I told him, the Rosh Yeshiva, I saw a sign of the Rosh Yeshiva's name, even a drop of water makes it ois grape juice, ois grape gafen. So he got a very painful face on, and he said to me, his words were, "Ata hare makir oti, ata yodea shani lo medaber shtuyot, az lama lo amarta lehem sheze shtuyot?" Al kan l'shana. He said, of course, adding a drop is still grape juice, but where the cutoff point is not so clear. So for that reason, I often warn people that you have what brand it is, the light, the Concord light, What brand is it?
Kedem has like a
Yeah, the big bottles of the light grape juice. So if you look on there, look at the ingredients. It's partially grape juice, partially reconstituted grape juice, and water added in there, because that's how you use reconstituted. So I tell people they shouldn't use it. It's a shackle.
I saw in the Yalkut Yosef English edition, Rabbi Yisrael Bitan said they did an investigation of Kedem grape juice in America because I guess the Sfardim have to have more grape juice to water ratio than Ashkenazim, something like that. And he wrote there that they asked the mashgichim at Kedem and they couldn't get a straight answer from them. They were choshesh, and then he said it's better not to use Kedem for Sfardim in America for grape juice, but he wouldn't give a definitive because he said we couldn't establish the facts on the ground. He said it doesn't taste like majority grape juice.
But again, majority doesn't help. We don't go by majority. To add, according to Rishon Zalman and Rebbe Yashiv agrees as well, by the way, that if you would add 10% water, it's probably shackle at that point. So if they're already saying the ingredients that it's, I think it's high up in the ingredients that there's water and reconstituted grape juice, that's a serious problem. And I saw in Eretz Yisrael just now, somebody had it on the table and I was more into them. So they showed me that, and there's the name of some Rav I've never heard of on there. It says that it's Ber Guffin, the something Rav, I never heard of him. I don't know if he's alive or not alive, whatever. But in Eretz Yisrael, somebody had on the table a bottle of light, and it has a hechsher bedats on there. It says Berchalaso Ber Guffin. I don't know if in Eretz Yisrael they make it differently. The bedats checked it out and it's made differently there, or if the bedats disagrees with Rishon Zalman and Rebbe Yashiv and they hold it's okay anyway, even though there's I don't know how much water goes in there. So that I can't say, but by me, Rishon Zalman and Rebbe Yashiv trump anybody else. And if they hold that it's a problem, they both hold that you're adding more than just a tiny bit of water, then it's shackle, then it's shackle. It's a problem. So to pour it out to the kids after Kiddush is fine, but like to use that for Kiddush, that becomes an issue.
So what does Rebbe do? Like if you don't have wine available, does Rebbe use like the regular grape juice in America? Like Kedem or Welch's?
I use the regular one, not the light.
Oh, okay.
The regular one doesn't say there's nothing, no water on the ingredients at all. It just says pure grape juice. And
the light, Rebbe says shackle?
I just stay away from it. Like, I don't know. I mean, I would, if it's in the middle of the meal, I already made Ber Guffin. I don't mind drinking some.
Right.
But to use it for Kiddush or just to make a bracha on its own right, then I would stay away from it because, whoever this Rav is, I don't know, saying it's Ber Guffin, and I don't really know exactly. I never was able to find out exactly how much water has been put in there. But if they're listing it high up in the ingredients, water and reconstituted grape juice, which that's also like water, which lost its bracha. So you already have two ingredients that are not wine in there that are putting in the grape juice. Okay. Okay, so going on to Siv Zion, we're not going to go into it. That's really not here. That's back in Simon Reish Daled. In Siv Ches Mekayna, the Kachin Yain Mavushal al Yain Shesh B'Dvash, Yeshamrim She'ein Mekachin Aleim. Went to the Ramban. They bring here B'Shem other poskim that once it's Mavushal, then it's puzzle. A minute of Kaddish Allah, a few yesh Yain Acher, Rakshina Tov, Mavushal Shesh B'Dvash. Most says the minute is to make Kiddush on it. We're not kosher for that if it's a better wine. So we see from here though that if they're everything equal, and that's what the Mishnah Berurah points out, the Ramah says the minig is to use it if that's the better wine. So Mishnah Berurah says in Chav Gimel, to imhem shavim yesh lachos liyashomrim shemachmirim b'zeh shalol kadosh. It's for sure better not to use yain mavushal if everything else is equal. So, and like we just said from Shlomo Zalman, that the reason that we say it's kosher is because since it came out wine and it wasn't the shtana the greyusa, so then it retains its bracha, but there still is a, since there is a Yashomrim over here, so in Eretz Yisrael, it's very, very common for people to be, I know that the grape juice over there, the standard, like Tirosh, and a lot of these grape juices they have are not mavushal, because a lot of people in Eretz Yisrael are machmir to try to have not mavushal yain and grape juice to be kosher for the shita. So that's fine if you're just, like in Kolul in Eretz Yisrael, and the only other guests you have are another Kolul couple from next door. But we today that have non-fruit people and sometimes goyim, whatever coming in, so then it's yatzas char be'efsedo to try to have non-mavushal wine on the table, and then you have all kinds of issues of keeping it away from people. There's a whole shaila, even if someone's a tinuk shenishba, Rishon Zalman was still machmir for yain nesech, unless that person wouldn't be Machal Shabbos in front of a Chashuv Rub. Today people are so far gone they didn't even know the difference. They were just they roll the window down and wish and wave to you as they drive by to a Chashuv Rub. So that shows how far gone they are. But anyway, it's for sure better for us who have cure of things going on not to have to be machmir to have not mavushal. So some people often think that they can get yain not mavushal, but they know it's pasteurized. So as long as it's pasteurized, that goes through the bishul process, and therefore it should be okay to have it on our tables with non-from people or goyim. So it's important to know that Rishon Zalman and Rabbi Yoshe both held that pasteurization is not considered mavushal. Because the whole point of mavushal is mavushal has to makes some change in it. The pasteurization process, by nature of the way it's made, is it's a closed system, and it's with a vacuum, because they take every step to make sure that there's no shinui, the greatest at all, no noticeable change in it whatsoever. So since that's the case, then it doesn't have the din mavushal to make a heter for the gias yain for a goy. So pasteurization, just know, is not considered mavushal, if that ever comes up. And now there's just a side point. It's not really to get to this so much, but it's a side point, important side point, that there is a chayadim that holds the b'chlal and the din of mavushal, that the negiah of a goy b'zman hazeh. So mikra din, we say that only the yain that's poured into the glass has din yain nesech. The yain that's in the bottle wouldn't, except for we say nitzok kachibor. We say that the nitzok, like for certain halachas in Yeridea, or even in Zroyim and Kachim, so the wine that gets into the glass that he pours out, that becomes yain nesech. The yain in the bottle wasn't, but since they get mechuber through the nitzuk when you're pouring it, so then that connects the wine in the bottle, the yain in the cup. That's what makes the yain in the bottle treif also. But the Chayadim says that we're only going to say nitzak kachibor when it's really yain nesech, when it's the goyim are actually over the vodazora, so it's a real chash yain nesech. Mashen ken bisman hazeh the goyim are not really over the vodazora, then we have to be machmer for nitzak kachibor. That Rishon Zalman, it's brought down in his name that he was machmer. He said that we're not machalik between goyim. Once Chazal said a xeris yain nesech by goyim, for the reason is a vodazora, fine. But once they said it by all goyim, and we're going to have the chumrah of nitzuk kachibor by that as well. So the nafkamina is what the yain in the bottle, according to Rishon Zalman, bisman hazeh would also be a problem.
Would there be a chilik between goyim and non-shomer Shabbos then?
He doesn't say that. I was thinking that. I guess maybe if it would be a shasat chak for some reason that you're going to cause a huge uproar or something like that. Maybe there's, it's good to know there is such a chayadam, that if you're in a real sticky situation, there is a chayadam, and it sounds like and there also are those that are makel by Chal Shabbos b'zman hazeh, because they all consider tinuk shenishba. So it's sort of have a sex fake over here to be makel, at least for shasat chak, for if a Jew is not shomer Shabbos, you accidentally put the non-kosher wine on the table, and everybody wants some, and it's on the table, and everybody's excited about it. It's a great wine, and non-shomer Shabbos grabs and pours the first drop. Then you can't take it off the table, is what it calls an uproar. So you'd have what to rely on to keep it on. I once had a Misa. I had a good bottle of non-kosher wine on the table, and there was a woman in the Geiros process on the table, not yet Jewish, and I was planning to pour it myself to everybody, and she reached across the table and grabbed the wine, picked it up, and said, "Wow, look at that! What is that?" She poured a little bit out. So I said, "It's yours now." So she
Maybe didn't want to rely on the Chayadam.
A, I didn't know the Chayadam then, and B, I didn't see any reason I needed to rely on that. It was not going to cause any uproar, and I for Karen, I wanted to teach her something. So she felt bad, but it's she got over it. Okay, just a couple last little points. The din of Chemer Medina in Siv Tes, we see over here that this is the din of Chemer Medina. The rush Balayla Lo Kaddish al Shechar al Pas. The Boker Yosef Tov the Kaddish al Shechar Shivarach Alav Shakol Kodam Birchas Mutzi Shim Yivarach al Pas Tchila En Kan Shum Shinui Divri Tamhem, which was Mishabeach the rush to say that Friday night you should not use Chemer Medina, you should use only Yain. If you don't have Yain, then rather than Chemer Medina, you should bring Kaddish on Pas. Since we hope Pasman like the rush that you could bring Kaddish on Pas, this would be a time to do it. And during the day, since there's no heker by Mekadosh al Pas, there you could use the Chemer Medina during Kiddush of the day. So Mr. Brewer says that Chemer Medina is only b'makom she'ein yain ratzui, and like in this place this year, there's no the wine's not around. Then everybody uses this beer or whatever else. So that's all. We're not going to go into this now. The klolim of Chemer Medina, that's a whole sugya by itself. We're not going to. It just happens to be here a little bit. One point I do want to talk about is that the Mishra does say that the dinner, like the Shulchan Aruch Achra, that at night you should never use Chemer Medina, only Yain or Pas. In case of the day, the Mishra paskins that if it's Chaviv Loi, he says Yash. Yash stands for Yain Saruf, which means schnapps. If you rather make schnapps in the morning rather than Yain, that you can do. As long as, and this is an important thing because I think a lot of people are nichshal on this, Mishnah Berurah says clearly here that only works if, number one, you have a kos shesh bo revis, because it's only considered a kos shel bracha, like we've learned many times, if it holds a revis. And number two, you have to drink a malelugmav, which is a rove revis of the mashka. So if you have some good starka, whiskey there, and you start off the morning, your first thing you do in the morning is a rove revis of a good solid whiskey. I hope you have a designated walker to get you out of that kiddush. But people often you see, I think, are nichshal that they just take a little shot glass and pour a little shot glass and make shakol, and they think you have a kiddush that way. It's a serious problem to do that because it's not machzik revis. Mishnah Berurah does say that if that's all you have is schnapps, and it's difficult to drink a whole malugum yourself. So if you remember, we had a machlokas in Reish Ayin Aleph if shtiyas kula mistarfim or not. If the shtiyah of everybody else is mistarf to the malugum, we're generally machmir. But in this case, he says if it's difficult, then you could if it's for you to drink the whole malugum of yourself, then you can let the others be mistarf to pass it around to a few people, make sure that combined you all drink a malugum. But just to drink a little schnapps glass, a little shot glass, then I don't think you're not yet say anything that way.
Rebbe's advocating for bigger shot glasses.
Yes, if you want to be Yosei with for that, yeah. They say in Chabad that people, if somebody would sit near the Rebbe and he would not drink at least most of a full glass of vodka, then you didn't rate. That's a whole big part of that. Okay. Then in Sif Yud, I'm not going to go over all the details of Sif Yud. I just want to point out one point here that there's a back and forth in the Mishnah Berurah. As you see, there's a nakuda of whether there's a whole shiloh whether or not benching is motzi the when you bench at the end, if you don't drink any grape juice and wine during the Suda, if you generally don't drink wine in the Suda and you do, even if you make Kiddush, so then Masha on the post you need to make a new paper agafen in the Suda. We didn't have das for that. And then there's a question if you didn't also, if the benching is, you would say the ala gefen for the Kiddush from the benching, which is on the Suda, and the Kiddush for the Suda. So the Maisa, they take on that, as far as to say that you are, so you wouldn't have to make another ala gefen, but just my personal anhaga I recommend is to always have das when you make Kiddush to drink a little bit of wine or grape juice during the meal. Even a sip, even if you take a sip during the meal, then for sure it's considered part of the Suda, and then the choladeus, the benching works also for the Kiddush. So you take yourself out of the whole machlokas that way. So I always leave a little bit of the grape juice over in my Kiddush cup, and after I motzi, take another sip, whether I'm going to drink wine or not more. But even if not, at least take a little sip during the meal. Then you take yourself out of the machlokas. You would say the kuli alma. Okay. So have a great Shabbos, and next week we will Reish Ayin Gimel. Try to keep on going and finish the Hilchos Kiddush.
Thank you, Avi.
Shabbos, good Shabbos. Safe travels, good Shabbos.
Thank you. Call to.